get a tragic here, and this is something new that I haven't really done before. This is actually a news post. I know I'm not going to start doing board game news. It's just way too much stuff to track. But there is a new LCG. It's been spoiled for a while, but it's now official. Called Warhammer 40,000 Conquest. Now, this is designed by Eric Lang. Eric Lang did Call of Cthulhu, which is the best card game ever invented. Well, I mean, he did the LCG reimagining of it. There's Warhammer, Warhammer Invasion he did, Star Wars LCG he did, a Game of Thrones he did. He pretty much did every single one except Lord of the Rings, I think. But regardless, Eric Lang is the designer. He's a bit of a hired gun. He's working with other designers, and I would assume that they're the ones doing the cards and the cycles, but he's setting up the main design of the mechanics. Whatever, regardless, who cares? Conquest, Warhammer 40k. Now, every single year, there's at least 2 or 3 threads on all the forums of people going, what is the LCG you want? What is the ultimate LCG that you think FFG should make? And every single time in one of those threads, I've said, Warhammer 40k, that's what I want. I want a Warhammer 40k. I love Warhammer 40k. The universe is so dark, it is so brutal. And I mean, it's almost too dark and brutal. And what I mean is, it's not too dark for me. It's just too dark for anything other than 40k to do. This game, for example, is not as dark. It's not going to be as dark. The simple fact that you can align with other races means that it's not as dark and brutal as the original 40k. But whatever, the point is, it's still a fantastic theme. Also, I mean, it has amazing, look at the art look at this art here. It's beautiful. I mean, there's such great art for 40k, and FFG has tons of art because of their, RPG systems that they use set in the 40k universe. And that also ties in. FFG already has the licenses. This is big news for me anyway, and I wanted to talk about just how I'm just so excited for Conquest, man. It's just going to be awesome. So let's have a quick look at some stuff from this game. First, we have a hero units. Now, these hero units, there's 2 that's been spoiled so far. We've got a Space Marine and an Orc. And these guys are, they're like, I guess they're like what you'd call IDs in Android Netrunner. They have special abilities that set up your, parameters for the game, and as well as persistent abilities that happen throughout the game. Now, let's have a quick looky here. We have their ability here, okay, as well as some flavor text. But they've got their ability, and down here you'll note that there's a 7/7. Now, I would expect everyone to be same in the core set, same as we were with Android Netrunner. But the 7/7 stands for 7 starting resources and a hand size of 7. Okay? So later on you might have different ratios here, smaller hand size, larger hand size, depending on the hero. Now, what is interesting about these heroes, besides the fact that they have their own abilities and can change the parameters of setting up the game, is that each hero comes with its own pod. Now, don't freak out. There's a lot of hate about the pod system in Star Wars due to its simplification of the deck building process. And to be honest, I actually agree with a lot of that. There's a lot of positives about the pod system, especially if you're into drafting. But in my opinion, I much prefer the deep strategy of deck building that you get without pods. But in this game, what we have is that each character comes with its own pod, and it can be, they don't have to all be unique. So my guess is that this guy, this captain, he comes with 2 copies of each of these cards, and these are special cards that are synergized with this particular hero. So picking your hero or your ID is going to be a much bigger thing than, say, Android Netrunner. which is quite a big thing in Android Netrunner. But not only are you picking one guy, you're picking 8 other cards for your deck. So it's going to be a hugely dictative process. And we're not quite sure how the cards are going to be produced. There's a possibility people have been talking about that if I include the captain here, I have to include his pod. But when I'm deck building, all the normal deck building rules are just single cards, just like a normal deck builder, or deck construction, I should call them nowadays. But the conjecture is that when you buy an expansion pack, you're going to get, say, a couple of different heroes, each with their 8 cards. And those 8 cards can be deck built as normal. But if you use the hero that synergizes with those cards, you have to use those cards. So if I was building a Space Marine deck with a different hero, there's a possibility I could still have access to these cards. And this could be the new way that they're set up. So we're going to get our cards in pods, but you're only restricted to a single pod, which is basically the pod system in Star Wars, but fixed. So we'll see if that's the way it's going to be, but that's the way it looks, and that's extremely exciting for me. Now, you'll also note that there is this big hammer up in the corner. Now, we're not 100% sure what this is. This one here is obviously the faction. But this big hammer in the corner is what we are assuming is the command value, and we're not sure exactly, but the gold hammer probably means 5 or 10 or some value, some fixed value, which and the command value is used in a later struggle, which I'll show you. But let's have a look at some other random units. Now again, that whole thing I said about like these guys in this pod, possibly they only can be used with the captain, otherwise you can't have access to them at all. And then there will be singles released in the pods as well, like these cards here. Okay? Because this could very well be the way it's going to be as well. But let's have a look at these 2 cards. And you'll note that like the leader, let's have a look at the orc. Orcs are cool. So like the leader, well, you know who's really cool? Chaos and Imperial Guard. But anyway, you'll note that these guys also have little silver hammers, and I expect them to be command values as well. So the Council has a command value of 1, and the Soul Grinder has a command value of 2. This up here is a resource cost. This here is a faction cost, a faction restriction, and I do not know what this thing is. So there's a lot of stuff we don't know. But what you do know is that there's these 2 numbers down here, and they're on all the cards, including the hero. And these ones are the attack power, which is the top one, and the hit points, which is the bottom one. Now, hit points are persistent, as in if you're damaged, you're always damaged until you're destroyed. Now, there does not seem to be a defense rating, just a hit point rating, which could be unusual. We're not really sure. But what that means, what this could mean, if this guy attacks at 4 and he has a health of 4, he's going to be dead. Now, we're not sure about the timing. We need to see the rules, but there is some concern because it states in the spoiler that the attacker chooses who he's attacking. So I can actually nominate the council to be attacked when I attack with the Soul Grinder. Now, because he attacks a 4 and he's got 4 hit points, the council is going to be killed. Is he killed instantly and removed from play, which means there's never a chance to attack back, or not? We don't know, but I'm thinking yes. So it's going to be quite hectic. Having the attacker choose the target rather than the defender choosing who's going to defend. So the attacker just declares I'm attacking and the defender defends. Having the attacker picking the target is pretty harsh. I mean, that is brutal. Something also interesting about attacking and defending is that when you attack, you tap. Okay, so you go, woohoo, I've tapped. And I've done my attack. And then this guy goes, woohoo, I've tapped. And he also taps. Okay, so both these cards are now attacked. Okay. Now, what happens is, in normal games, once everyone's tapped at a particular attack, that's the end of the combat. But not in this game. You now have an opportunity to retreat. So you can retreat out of the battle, or you can stay in the battle. If you stay in the battle, everyone untaps, and then there's another round. And this continues forever until only one faction, only one player's cards are at the battle zone. Okay? So, like, a lot of card games are really about the building up of your board. And this mechanic, especially with the attacker able to pick who they're attacking, and then the attacks just constantly resolving until there's one player standing, is going to really affect the player board. Because not only will it wipe cards off really quickly, it's also going to leave your powerful units wounded, because the wounds are persistent, which means that even if you have all your units destroyed, you can put down new units and gain control of that battlefield again quite easily, because his big units are weak. Interesting, very interesting. I'm very, very keen for the way the battles seem to work. Now let's have a look at the battles. Talking about all this battle stuff, what's all that about? Well, here you go. They've given us one little picture and some descriptions. Now basically what happens is we have a series of planets which are kind of like Call of Cthulhu style story decks. Okay? And they go in between us, and each player commits units to those planets. Now you can commit units to any planet, but only the planets that have a commander in them, or the planets that are the first planet, we'll call this one the first planet, resolve. So in this case, even though there's units here and here, only this planet and this planet are going to resolve. So what's the first player thing? The first player seems to be quite a huge deal. Whoever's the first player, the planet to their left becomes the first planet. Whoever's the first player, the planet on their left, so that would be this one, if we were first player, as in this is the first player on this side. The planet on the left is the first planet, and this always resolves. But at the same time, any planet where there's a hero, also, or a warlord, I think they call it in this game, also resolves. So in the case here, we would have 3 planets resolve, because we have a guy here as well. Okay? Now, otherwise, only the leftmost planet to the first player resolves. So it's going to be quite a big deal to be first player, because you're going to be able to dictate the direction that the planets resolve, because this one resolves, this one resolves, this one resolves, this one resolves, this one resolves. Now, we don't really know how this is going to work. Like, if once a planet resolves, does it stay on the table? Does the battlefield constantly stay there, or is it removed, you know, and replaced? Do the planets slide along to fill up gaps, or are new cards dealt into the existing gaps? So there's a lot we don't know about the planets, so we really need to learn more about them. But it's quite clear that there can be multiple battlefields happening at once. And well, let's look at the planets in a little more detail now. So we've had a few planets spoilt nice and legible. So let's have a look at Belarus, and let's also take a look at, how about this one? There's a couple more that have been spoilt, but these are good for my example. Actually, let's look at this one as well. Where is it? Here. Now, the first thing that's a problem is that we don't know what these icons are yet, as far as I know. If anyone does, please tell me. There has been speculation that it's going to be like Star Wars Decipher, as in only certain units can battle at certain locations. This green icon looks a bit like a siege agent. Maybe it means only, you know, vehicles, like tanks or whatever, can be there. Who knows? but there's an icon there that we're not quite sure what it entails yet. This is definitely a servo skull. This is a melee weapon, and this is a vehicle. So we don't really know. So let's just not worry about that for now. What do we know? Well, we know that each planet has 2 struggles resolve at it. There's 2 struggles. There is the command struggle, which, as we talked about, is related to, if I can find somebody, yeah, which is related to the total command points. And whoever wins the command point can activate the planet's ability in these sort of symbols. See, Belarus on the left here has 2 inside a little box, while Osseous has a 2 inside a sort of cog. Now, what that means is if you win the command battle, which is separate to the combat stuff, you draw 2 cards if you're over here on Belarus. If you're on Osseous 4, you get 2 resources. So that's pretty cool. Now, unlike normal games, there's no real... So it's important to keep that in mind, because that's going to be a huge deal for gaining a leg up in this game, is not just focusing on combat, but focusing on command to get those extra resources, get those extra card draw. See, what happens is after the entire battle sequence is over, so after all 3 of these battles are done, so this one's done, this one's done, and this one's done, everyone draws 2 cards and gets 2 resources. Okay, so it's going to be a huge deal, this doing these command things. Now, if you have a warlord at any kind of location and there is no other warlord, regardless, you will always win the command. Probably because this golden command thing is worth so much, we don't really know. But anyway, the point is there's 2. Then there's the combat struggle, and whoever wins the combat struggle gets to activate the battle ability, and there's possibility that there's going to be other keywords eventually, but you get the battle ability, okay? So they call this the spoils of war. So each location, each planet is going to have their own battle ability and their own command ability. So that's pretty cool. So finally, let's have a look at the factions and how the factions work. Now, if you're a big 40k person, the first thing that's going to jump out at you is that there's no Tyranids. And then the second thing that's going to jump out at you is that there's no Necrons. This is a huge problem in my opinion, and almost unforgivable. I mean, if it wasn't for the fact that I love 40k so much, I mean, if I was on the fence about this game, that would be a deciding factor. No Tyranids, no Necrons. What were they thinking? Still, there's always deluxe expansions, and hopefully they will remedy this. But then again, remember, Warhammer Invasion never got Tomb Kings, etc., etc. So we don't really know. But the point is, no Tyranids, crazy, and no Necrons, which is probably just as crazy. But no Tyranids, I mean, that is undeniably crazy. Anyway, the way it works is that we have what they call this wheel. Okay, so let's have a look at Imperial Guard. Okay, so the Emperor's Finest here, they can actually ally with either Space Marines or with Orcs, but not with both, because they're adjacent on this wheel. So the Tau, for example, can align with Space Marines or the Eldar. The Chaos Marines can go with the Dark Eldar or the Orcs. Now, anyone who is a 40k lore type person is going to have a real problem with this wheel, because it's just ridiculous, really. I mean, there are, you know, occasional precedences for Orcs working with the Imperium, but I mean, no. You know, I mean, like there's Space Marine chapters that they're it's like death to the Xeno, man. I mean, it's kind of silly. And Dark Eldar working with Eldar, it's just crazy. Tau working with anybody. So the faction thing, while I really like the idea of the wheel, like see how this guy can work with Chaos or he can work with Imperial Guard. That's really, really cool because it's going to allow some very interesting decks based upon who you choose as your leader. It's going to create variety inside the decks because not only are the combination of cards, you know, restricted, it unlike say splitting the factions down the middle, it means that if you're running Imperial Guard, there's two types of deck combinations that you can build, and how many archetypes are in those combinations, who knows. And that's really, really cool. And there's probably a neutral faction that has not yet been spoiled, but I'm absolutely certain there's going to be neutral cards as well, which can go into any deck. So, well, what else do I have to say? I think that's about it. Wounds persist. Yeah, I mean, the resource pool is like a Netrunner kind of resource pool, as in your resources don't deplete or don't regen automatically. You have to regen through card effects. Of course, there is the two resources per turn, but I think it's persistent. So if you have 15 resources next turn, if you don't spend them, you're going to have 17. And that's pretty much the game. I mean, look at the art. It's just going to be awesome. I can't wait. Chaos and Dark Eldar. That's what I'm going to be making, and probably Tau and Space Marines are the first decks that I'm going to be looking at. I'd probably want to do Tau and Dark Eldar, but I'm definitely going to be doing Chaos and Dark Eldar, even though, like I said, anyone who's into the lore will know that these factions don't really mix, but who cares? Who cares? Okay, so that's pretty much the game in a nutshell. I've already gone like 20-something minutes, so I'll probably try and edit some of this down. But I'm extremely excited for this game. The mechanics sound awesome. It sounds like there's going to be a lot of combat, but it sounds like there's going to be a lot of decision points. And with any luck, they're going to have a lot of player interaction through interrupts and ways to modify once the battles are set up to really, you know, stick it to people. Like, oh, I've got more power, or wait, my defense has been raised, or oh, let's ignore your thing. It's a little bit unfortunate that the combat is so simple. It's just it's just an attack value versus a a health value. I prefer, like, that's one of the things that makes Call of Cthulhu so great, is that there's, like, you know, all these different struggles that you have to work at, not just one struggle. Combat is only one of the many struggles in Cthulhu. And also the pod system, really, really good. We're not sure exactly how it's going to work, whether there's going to be individual cards or whether, like I said, the only way cards are going to be introduced into the game is in these squads. And it's only if you choose the squad leader that you have to have his other cards. Otherwise, you can use them. So we have to see how that turns out. Now, I wanted to talk about this other thing, but, you know, I didn't really get time. But I wanted to mention this too. AEG is reprinting Doomtown, which is, like, up there in, like, the best CCGs ever made from the golden era. I mean, this news is, like, bigger than Netrunner being reprinted, in my opinion. I mean, this is a fantastic game. It's in a way, I guess, it's a reimagining of 5-card Stud. It's a heavy bluffing game. You know, like it's sort of set in like a Western sort of setting, but it's like a fantasy mashup Western setting, you know, with ninjas and vampires and all sorts of craziness. And this is a reprinting. It's redone. They've got factions and stuff now, and all this sort of 4 factions. You know, they've changed it quite a bit, it seems. There's very little information about what they've changed, but Doomtown, the original Doomtown, is an absolute. It's a brilliant game. I mean, it is up there with Middle Earth. It's up there with Star Wars Decipher. I mean, it is, you know, it's one of the best that were ever created. And it's just huge news that Doomtown and Conquest have both been spoiled basically at the same time. And yeah, I'm just over the moon. The only problem is there's no way I can afford all the games that I'm collecting now, all the card games. So I think I'm going to have to dump two. I'm probably going to dump Mage Wars, which is a game I love, but I don't get to play it very much because it's quite a long game. And I've got a lot of cards and I've actually hardly ever deck built with that game. I'm pretty much using default decks or decks that I've net decked. So I'm going to dump my regular buying of Mage Wars, and I'll probably dump Star Wars, and that'll allow me to fit Doomtown and Conquest in. So yeah, I mean, huge news all around. Oh, the other good thing about Doomtown is that they're dumping the CCG angle. So instead you actually have what they're calling saddlebags. So it's basically a CCG. They're calling it an ECG, which stands for extendable card game. But it's the same concept as LCG, except not copyrighted, which basically means that the cards are known quantities. You're not buying random packs. And I mean, if it had random packs, I was out. So I'm very happy. But yeah, Doomtown, fantastic game. And there's the guy who made, like Database Zero, the guy who made the plugin for ANR for Octagon that's so popular, has an extremely good plugin for the original Doomtown. I strongly suggest everyone start playing that and get acquainted with this game, because this game is going to be huge. I mean, seriously, this is big news for the card game scene. Anyway, thanks for watching. Doomtown, Conquest, pretty exciting.